So I thought I'd just give a little perspective on screening, because it seems like we've been through the same things that you're going through, and I guess any controversial topic requires resilience, perseverance, and stick-to-itiveness. So, and then David and Tracy will talk a little bit more about the actual screening program. So we started in 1992. You know, that's 27 years ago. So you started later, so you have to keep going. We had that design that we gave a chest X-ray and CT to everyone that entered. We had 1,000 patients. It took us until 1998 to get all those patients together. And then when we presented the results, and by the way, we had very different types of, we looked at them in little images, little tiny images. Now we have monitors. So there's been a tremendous change in the technology over the period of time. And what were the results? Well, we said 85% of the lung cancers were found in stage 1. That was amazing, because it was typically 5 to 10% that were found. And 85% of the stage 1 lung cancers were missed by chest X-ray. And we took that using the stage distribution. We said the cure rate would be 80%. Now, if you announced a medical cure for something that's deadly at 80%, there'd be hallelujahs everywhere, right? But it wasn't. We did have tremendous number of calls, 400 calls a day that we had to deal with. And there was a lot of publicity from that Lancet article. The New York Times certainly helped it. And interestingly enough, then the National Cancer Institute have a board of medical advisors. They're appointed for a certain period of time. And they met in 1999. Of course, nobody invited us to talk about our article, but the whole session was on our article. And there was a Harvard statistician who was a member of the committee who said, well, I thought this evidence was sufficient. Screening should start, which we also thought. But he said, my colleagues in the early detection program thought there had to be a randomized trial. So that really led to the National Lung Screening Trial, which was started in 2002 and ended in was published in 2011. CMS gave approval in 2015. So it takes a long time, so you have to be patient and persistent. In the meantime, what did we do? We started, David started really the idea of volumetrics, that you can assess change at a malignant rate within 3 months on baseline and within 1 month on annual repeat. And we've continued to show that this is a very good way of decreasing any unnecessary workup. So that's still amazingly, we started that in 1998. We got NIH grants, but it still isn't as good as it could be, and it could make it very efficient. We could get a lot of information about blood vessels and so on. So image analysis, which we've been working with Tony Reeves for a long time, very much has a strong future. But in the meantime, we also took our 1,000 patients, we expanded to New York City. Actually, Giuliani gave us the funds for that, some tobacco settlement funds, and we expanded throughout the world. We now have 82,000 participants with long-time follow-up on many of them, and it requires all of those in green and blue and red infrastructures that you need to have. And that allowed us to publish the New England Journal in 2006, where we showed that for all cases of lung cancer, whether they were, regardless of stage, that blue line shows how many, the long-term 10-year survival rate of how many can be cured, 80%. That was what we had projected. And if you were in stage 1, it was even better. Now again, that kind of documented what we had said in our earlier report. And that led to a lot of publicity, and with publicity comes a lot of problems also. What we can say today is we can cure most people with lung cancer if they're diagnosed by screening. And it's amazing that in the US, there are really still only 4% of the people who are eligible for the very narrow CMS requirements. Those CMS requirements only cover 20% of people who have lung cancer. So, but still, there are only 4% that are actually doing it. So you're doing a good job here in Libby getting them all together. So we went for all of those years. We now just finished our 40th conference because we have them every 6 months. And we think that those regular conferences are very important to participate in. And we've, so 20 years. And our long-term survival has shown the same thing. It's a little bit better because the technology and the surgery and everything has gotten better. But 85%, 20-year survival, you know, and I say if any kind of drug would have done that, we would have all had funding for everything that we wanted. So in the future, it's the quantitative health check. Those are all the organs we see in the low-dose CT scan of the chest. And Tony has some very nice processes for taking, extracting or segmenting that information, putting it into a quantitative report, and we visualize it in the future. I mean, we can actually already do that. And if you have a CT scan, we can actually run it through a computer, give you quantitative information about your lungs, your heart, and we still need to work on the normal range that you would then provide with that same report. So that's where we think there's a lot of potential in the future. So the screening report that we provide for all of our screenings, including the ones for Libby, is we provide a structured report that gives you information on the lungs, and extent of emphysema on the pleura, on the heart, gives you an ordinal score of the heart, and all the other organs in the chest. And all of that is provided in the protocol. We provide whether there are plaques, what the size is, if there are calcifications, if there's laminar. So we have a whole checklist that we've worked with Al Miller all along on providing the detailed information on the pleura. And David, I think, where's David? He'll show some of that. So we report that on all of the ones, whether there's laminar, the thin pleural, or there are pleural plaques. And then we have a standard population. The good thing about having all the other, is we have wonderful control populations that we can always compare to. So in our program, ELCAP, we have an IRB, so we've always enrolled people 40 and older, never smokers, current smokers, and former smokers. So we have a wide range, really, of information on all of them. The CMS still requires 30 pack years or more, 55 to 78. The NCCN guidelines are 50 and older, 20 pack years of smoking. And with the Nelson study coming out, which is the Dutch and Belgium study, they had about 15 pack years and people 50 and older, and showed an even better mortality benefit. So hopefully the criteria will become broader.
And you were talking a little bit yesterday about the risks, because there was always concerns about radiation, but it's really not a very significant risk anymore.
No, you can do it at such low dose, and in fact the latest scanners even get it almost close to a chest x-ray. And mammography we've done for many years, 20 years, 30 years for women, and that hasn't really shown any detrimental effect. You have to standardize it at the low dose, and the CMS registry requires that. And the follow-up of any follow-up CT should also be at low dose. And that's not happening everywhere in the country. They're using high dose. The lungs provide such good contrast that low dose is sufficient, really. And they should all be at low dose.
It's interesting when I look at the struggle of Claudia screening ELCAP and Libby, they're sort of similar struggles. The science is there, the people with the knowledge to make it move forward are there, but the biggest obstacle, politics. And it's just, when you look at the politics involved with screening, here you have an 80% cure rate. Like Claudia said, if you had a drug that provided an 80% cure rate, people would be flying off the rails. Why? Because it makes a ton of money. This doesn't really make any money. This just saves lives, you know. And I think that's the same thing with Libby. I think, you know, there's a lot of forces. It was interesting yesterday. Aubrey and I were standing next to that timeline that you guys have in the Libby clinic, and when you follow that timeline, Aubrey was just giving me insight at every step of the way how politics came into play to try and give you the opposite view. This stuff kills, there's a counterforce saying it doesn't. You know, we need to go forward in this direction, there's another counterforce taking you in the other direction. And I think, like Claudia said, it's the persistence, the stick-to-itiveness that you need to do to get this thing forward. To us, it's clear, but to most of the population out there, it's not. And you have to realize there are real forces that want to take it in the opposite direction. I don't want to sound like a conspiracy theorist or anything, but many
But
of
it's true.
these, you know, a lot of the people, let's say for screening, they don't want screening to get attention because then it gets funded. There's a limited amount of funds, and they want those funds to go to drugs, and there's influences in the ACS, and then in turn with the NIH. There's just these forces that are competing for funding that would like to see screening and prevention cast aside so that there's more chance of them getting funded. And I see the similar political battles being fought here. And in the end, you see Claudia won. Finally, she was vindicated, but that was 20 years down the line.
Yeah, if you were at ATS, and you didn't know me then, I was in the crowd at ATS when you went and presented. You were at Cornell then. And I think tomatoes flew. I mean, people were, I mean, I saw how they attacked you and that. Wow, I didn't realize what all was going on at that time, but I
Well, that's
remember that
mild
something.
compared to other attacks. That,
Yeah.
but the thing is,
presented at ATS on this. Do you remember when you first did that? I was in
Well, I had a-
2004 or 5.
something like that.
When yeah.
Yeah,
And I thought, and then, when she, you know, once again, I mean, I can't believe what you went up against and managed to still keep moving ahead and charging. You knew it was right. You know, you knew absolutely.
I knew the data, I knew, and in fact, when I had written up the Lancet article, I said, Jesus, I didn't even realize how small we're picking them up and what the difference is. And I said, how can we ever get this across to everybody? Well, I finally realized it takes a long time to get it across to everybody, but I figured every surgeon who takes out a cancer, a small cancer, and that person lives, right, you're gonna have the surgeons on board. Although, so what you really have to have is you have to have a team that stays with you. And that's what you have. And that's what keeps you going.